Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's Zoom webinar with Louise Charreau of Domaine Charreau and Joe Locke MW, our buyer for the Loire. I'm Emma, I work in the tastings team, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Tim and Gil, who will be doing behind the scenes technical side of things. So we've just got a few points of housekeeping to cover before we get started. So apologies to those of you who've heard this many times before. As I said before, you can zone out for this bit if you like. So we'll all be on mute for the duration of the webinar. This is to ensure that there'll be no background noise. If you're on a mobile, swipe right for speaker view so you can concentrate on Louise's presentation in the first half. And then you might want to go to gallery view for the second part where you've got Joe and Louise who will be talking about the wines that they're tasting. If you fancy it, we'll be taking questions in the second half of the event. So please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen if you'd like to ask any questions to Louise and Joe, and use the chat function to tell us where you are and what you're drinking. If you want to concentrate on the presentation and want to disable the chat function, click or tap on the three dots next to the chat, then on the bell button, and that will disable notifications. Hopefully, there might be the time and decent enough internet connection for you to ask your questions directly to Louise and Joe. If so, I'll call your name and ask you to speak. We will unmute you first, so don't worry. And then finally, this is the 5th of the Wine Champs tastings that we've hosted this week. So it's been an extremely busy week, but great fun. We have had, for Wine Champs, 1,102 wines were tasted, a mere 57 wines were declared winners, which means that these wine champions are very special indeed. The Society's Muscadet won out in the miscellaneous whites section under £10, which doesn't sound that glamorous, but it's as Freddie, one of our buyers, says, to be a champion, a wine must over-deliver, but that doesn't mean shouting the loudest, because balance and harmony are vital. And the Society's Muscadet has that in spades. So that's enough from me. I'm going to pass you over to Joe, and I really hope that you all enjoy your virtual tasting. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, especially on a Saturday lunchtime. Great to have you along, and great to see Louise as well. Thank you, Louise, for joining. I first met Bernard Charreau, Louise's father, when I joined the Wine Society as a buyer in 2004. It was a crazy vintage because it was obviously then tasting the 2003 vintage, which was that really hot year. And I had bought Loire wines before, but I was really thrown by that vintage. Anyway, we were in safe hands. The Wine Society, of course, has worked with Charreau for many years, well over 30 years now, which Louise is going to go on to explain to us. And in that time, they've not only supplied us with delicious Muscadet, including our own label, but they have invested hugely in this region, which has really, it's had its ups and downs. The Muscadet region has had its challenges, it's had its climatic challenges. Numerous vintages in the last few have been hit by frost, some very severely. So it hasn't been an easy place to produce wine, but the family have an incredible commitment to the region, which Louise is going to explain to us. So if you have a glass, please relax with a glass in hand while Louise takes us on a visit to the region, to the property, to the family, and then even with one or two videos, all being well. So Louise, thank you once again. Delighted to see you. Over to you.
Thank you, Joe. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you today to give you a little bit more explanation about the Muscadet region in general, and of course our winery in particular. But first of all, I would like to give you some overview of what Muscadet is today, and what is going to be the next step for us. So first of all, the important thing to know is that for you, maybe the Muscadet is the closest solution for you to visit, because I think this is a 1-hour flight with EasyJet from London. So you're more than welcome to come and see us in Muscadet. Sometimes it's easier to see the thing with your real life and your real eyes. So the
Louise,
Muscadet,
sorry to interrupt, but we're getting a little bit of interference. I wonder if it might be your phone.
No.
No? Okay. All right. Well, let's press on. Hopefully it will get better.
Okay. Let me know if I can, but I didn't change anything, but we'll see.
Okay.
So the first thing to know is that Muscadet is one of the biggest white wine appellation in the Loire Valley, with more than 9,000 hectares of vines. So it's really on the west part of the Loire Valley, with 500 wineries, so 500 winemakers, so 500 different people to make wine. But the peculiar thing is that there is only one grape that we are working with, that is the Melon de Bourgogne grape. And so for the appellation, you can see here, so Muscadet is divided into 3 different kind of appellations. You have the Lac de Grandlieu, which is Côte de Grandlieu appellation, which is on the western part, very close to the Atlantic Ocean. You have on the northern part the Château d'Ancenis and Château de la Loire appellation. And in the middle, you have the Sèvres appellation. The Sèvres is really the biggest and the oldest appellation of the Muscadet. And it takes the name of the 2 rivers that crosses the appellation. One, the Sèvres, and the second one is the Main River. So you can see that we are really situated on the south part of the Loire that you have here, and with the Atlantic influence. So the climate is really on oceanic, which is very important for us to understand, is that the oceanic climate is very peculiar for Muscadet and gives a special way in the terroir to the taste after of the wines. So the Melon de Bourgogne grape, you might asking sometimes why Melon de Bourgogne is called from Burgundy, but it's not from Burgundy. So we are really in the Loire Valley, but the Melon de Bourgogne is actually originated from Burgundy. So the story is that during the 19th century, the winters on the west part of France were really cold. So the wine growers in this part of France, they were looking for a grape that was able to grow in very, very deep winter. So this is how they decided to bring the Melon de Bourgogne from Burgundy into the south of the French Brittany, where now the Melon de Bourgogne is 100% of the appellation. So you can find Melon de Bourgogne in other places in the world, and mainly in Oregon, because we are on the same latitude, and also a little bit always in Burgundy, but not in Burgundy appellation, but in vin de pays. So the Melon de Bourgogne is really what makes our appellation very special, because it's a real absorber of terroir. This is very important because during the presentation I am going to make with you, you will hear me say terroir, 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 because it's something really that makes the Muscadet appellation so special today, is the diversity of terroir. So Melon de Bourgogne is really an absorber of terroir. It's also very known to be very fresh, with a good saltiness and huge complexity when we play on the different winemaking processes that we can make in our region. So now that we had made an overview of who we are, we're going to talk a bit more about the family, because the Charreau Carré estate is a real story of family. My grandfather Bernard bought the Château estate in 1953, and he decided to found the Charreau Carré house with my grandmother in 1960. So here are the pictures of the family. Hope you enjoyed them. In the middle, you have my grandfather who was named Bernard Charreau. So we call him Bernard Charreau Senior because my father is also named Bernard Charreau. this is the junior one. On the left, you can see my father, and I am the third generation of the estate to make wine today. So I still work closely with my father. I joined the winery in 2014 after a master in marketing in wine business and after a degree in viticulture and enology. So today I am able to make the wines as well as doing all the commercialization aspects of the wine, because it's something very important. We also want to conserve and preserve all the relationship we have with all our clients in France and all over the world. And this is what we are going today. So I'm very happy. So just to continue with the story a little bit. So we've already said about the foundation of the winery. My grandmother's name was Charreau. So this is why they decided when they chose the name of the estate to put Charreau. So Charreau is my grandfather's name, and Charreau was my grandmother's maiden name. So currently we have 133 hectares of vines. I will explain a little bit later how it happens that we have quite a huge surface of vines. It's a huge story as well. And these vines are separated in 6 different estates in 5 villages with 5 different kind of subsoils. So you maybe can start now to understand why it's so important for us to have vines in different villages, because it's always a question of terroir and diversity. And also our Château estate is situated in Saint-Fiacre-sur-Maine, and Saint-Fiacre is really at the confluence of the 2 rivers, the Sèvre and the Maine. So we are really in the heart of the appellation. And just to give you a little bit more idea of what is the landscape in our region, here is a small video. So what's interesting in this video is that you can really see the impact of the 2 rivers on the landscapes. All our estates are either situated on one hillside or the other of the 2 rivers. So that makes a great exposure for our vines. So that's something you will have to keep in mind for a little bit later as well. And that explains as well why we have this obsession with diversity. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what makes us different from the others. And the first thing I would like to talk about the surly process. Surly process is something very specific to Muscadet. And we've always been doing it for the very beginning. And also the second thing that makes us special is that the fact that we've decided a long time ago, by the time of my grandfather, to make wines with an ageability capacity. So that means that the bottles are aged at the winery before we release them. So that's why for some bottles you can have 2014-15 vintages. The other thing is that we want to make our specifications. So we work parcel by parcel. Every wine is different, it's coming from a specific parcel of vines, and we don't do blending in between different parcels. And so again, we will talk about geology, diversity, and that makes us also another thing about the terroir. So we say often that we've been one of the pioneers of the surly, because my grandfather was one of the first to leave the wine in the cellar, in the vat surely for a long time. So and this surly process is really something that belongs to the Muscadet wine grower. So it's not something that you can find on the labels in other bottles from any other region, because it's something that we own. Of course, there is Lee in other different kind of wine, because the Lee is the dead yeast after fermentation, and we will leave the wine on this yeast during few months. So the wine can gain in complexity, also has a better capacity of aging, and also it's an antioxidant for the wine. So it can really also decrease the amount of sulfites we can put in the wine. And so the mention complémentaire sur Lee exists in the Muscadet for now since 1977. So it's something that now we master well. And in Charreau, 99% of our wines are mixed surely. So either they are mixed surely 6 months or maybe 3 or 4 years, all our wines are mixed surely. So the specification is that you have to understand that to have a wine surely is minimum 6 months, but there is also a maximum of 14 months. The idea is to say that the taste of the surely Muscadet, you can really identify this taste when the wine is kept minimum 6 and up to 14. If it's less than 6, that means that the wine will be not as complex. So it will be really much more on the easy to drink and on the freshness. And if the wine is up to 14 months, that means the complexity will increase and the wine will be more deeper and more complex. But I will also let my father explain you a little bit with his own word, what is the surely aging that we are doing at the winery.
C'est un tonnelier qui a eu l'idée de mettre des verres sur chaque fond de la barrique, de manière à ce qu'on puisse voir ce qui se passe à l'intérieur. Alors, ça permet de visualiser à la fermentation le dépôt de lit progressif. Le lit va donc de la complexité, des arômes, du gras, et c'est également un élément protecteur au vin. Donc ça, c'est un procédé qui existe dans tous les vins. Alors, la particularité dans le Muscadet, c'est qu'en fait, on garde le contact avec cette lie du vin tout au long de l'hiver, jusqu'au printemps.
So here we go for the surely. I hope you all enjoyed the video of my father. It was important for me to have him with me today as well, because as I said, we are a family story. So the third element of the Charreau Carré specification is that we are used to keep the wine in bottle. So before releasing some of our cuvées, as the communal, for example, the wine that is coming from the very old vines, we keep the wine few years at the winery before releasing them, just to have another structure, because the wine gaining complexity and structure in the bottle. And so now we're going to make a small focus on the terroir and on a new appellation that is coming now, or maybe you've heard of it. It's called the Cru Communal of Muscadet. The Cru Communal idea was really to show the diversity of terroir we have in our subsoil in Muscadet. So today we have identified a total of 10 different kinds of subsoils. So the name of the villages, one village, we represent one kind of subsoil. So in Charreau Carré, we don't have the 10 cru, but we are happy to have vineyards that can correspond to 4 different kinds of terroir. And as you can see on the map, here is the 6 different wine estates we have in Charreau Carré. So here up to the north, very close to the Loire, You have the domaine du Bois Brûlé and the domaine de la Chênaie that are on the micaschist subsoil. Here is Château Loise-de-Linière. Château Loise-de-Linière is really at the confluence of the two rivers, overlooking the confluence, and it's on orthogneiss subsoil. Château de la Contrie is a vineyard situated on terraces that are actually overlooking on the other side of the Château Loise-de-Linière, so different kind of exposure, and on a schist subsoil. Château de Chasseloir is also on schist gneiss subsoil, and Château de la Tourmelière is situated on the other side of the river, of the main river, on granite and decomposed granite. So we are very happy today to have the possibility to make 4 different kind of cru. And I would like to explain also why we've ended up with this obsession with terroir. And to go back a little bit in times, the times of my grandfather. My grandfather was actually, when he started, a wine merchant, and he decided at some point to become a wine grower. So when he bought the Château de Chasseloir estate, he also was also buying grapes to other growers to sell the wine. And so he did that for his life. And when my father took over the winery, he decided to actually stop with the wine merchant system. He wanted to select his own parcels of wine to really represent the diversity of subsoil. So that's why this took him 30 years with my help at the end, because we finished all of this in 2017. So since 2017, we really have all the wines we produce are coming from the parcel wines we have chosen carefully to really represent one kind of terroir and have a specific taste, because every terroir gives a specific taste to the wine. So, and now today, my objective is to, I can't hear you, Emma.
So sorry, you've gone crackly again. We were wondering, it might be helpful if Tim shares the screen for you and you come off that. That might make it a slightly better reception. What do you think? Should we give that a go?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, it's all right. Don't worry. Tim, if you don't mind stepping in and doing the share screen, and then Louise will come off it, and hopefully we'll get a better connection that way. Perfect. I think we're good to go again.
Okay.
Thanks, Louise.
So I was explaining that now the objective for us is really to be able to make a different kind of cru communal. So today we are happy to have 4 different of them. So can I change the screen, or it's you that have to do it again? Yeah, so the idea of the cru communal is what I was explaining, is really a focus on geology. And why is this focus is what I said at the beginning, is that Melon de Bourgogne is an absorber of terroir. So that means that if we have 10 different cru, we'll have 10 different villages, 10 different terroirs, and so 10 different kind of aromatic expression. So that's the difference between, for example, a wine that will come from Clisson will be on granitic subsoil. That will be much more powerful and more on the depth than, for example, a Haye Fouass wine that will more on the fineness and the minerality and the complexity. So we really want to also to show that this kind of wine has a great capacity for aging. So that's why most of the cru communaux you will find are minimum 24 months of aging on lees. There is no maximum. It's every wine grower that have to decide whether they want to keep it longer or not. For us, it depends on every vintage because every vintage is different. So we try the wines very often in the vat. And at some point we decide just to bottle it because we think it's good to be drunk. So the French, the thing also you have to understand is that the cru communaux label doesn't mention the surly, because if you followed well what I say, the maximum of 14 months is for the surly. So the cru communaux has more than 14 months. So most of the time and all the time, the cru communaux is not surely mentioned on the label. So if you can go on this map, so it's a map that just shows you the different cru communaux. So the most of them, so 9 of them are in the Sèvres sub-appellation, and one is Château, which is on the Coteau de la Loire. Here, the 4 cru I have underlined are the one we are currently making at Charreau. So Haye Fouass village that you can see on the north is the Clos de l'Oiselinière and is on orthognath subsoil. Monnières-Saint-Fiacre, which is in the middle of the appellation, is on a gneiss subsoil. This is where we make les terrasses de la Country. And Château is on decomposed granite, which is another kind of granite different from can you hear me?
Yes, all good.
Yep, all good. I can hear you.
Okay, good, because I have a notification saying that it's not working. That's why. Sorry. So in the south we have 2 kind of granite. Clisson is a deep granite, and Château is a decomposed granite. So it's really interesting to see that one of our vineyard is actually really on the different. There is in the middle of the estate, there is on the left we have granite, and on the right we have the decomposed granite. So the difference of terroir is really at one point. It's very interesting to see from one side of the road, and on the other side of the road it's not at all the same kind of subsoil. So it's very interesting for us to be able now to propose 4 different cru, because really can really say when you taste the wine. And if you move to the next slide, we can really see that there is 4 different kind of stones that will give 4 different kind of aromatic expression to the wine. So for example, Monnières-Saint-Fiacre will be much more on citrus, orange blossom, and onion wax with exotic fruits, rather than granite on Clisson will be more rich and concentrated with cooked fruit and ripened citrus. So that's an example to see how the terroir has a huge impact on the taste of the wine. And you can move to the next slide. So this is the, I will maybe have to go back to my screen because I have a video that you don't have. Or maybe we can go to the next one if you prefer.
Up to you, Louise. Do you want to try and share the video?
I can try and show.
See how it goes, and if it doesn't work, then we can move. We can move straight on at that point.
Okay. So that's my screen. Good. So here is my father. He wanted just to explain how we did start with the Wine Society, as it's a very long-term relationship.
Hello, I am Bernard. I am the father. I'm very pleased to communicate with you today on the vineyards. In fact, we started with the Wine Society 36 years ago, when Sébastien Payne and Sir Penning Russell came to Château, and they convinced me to make the Wine Society bottle, and it was the Sèvres at the time, not surely, And also we add some Château as Oiselinière and Comte-le-Loup.
So that's how everything started. I really wanted my father to explain this because, of course, I wasn't here to see this. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation and you learned more thing about the Muscadet and the terroir specification for Muscadet. I really wanted to finish this presentation just to tell you one thing that I think is the most important when you drink Muscadet. You really have to think about Muscadet as not as one product, but as several products, because even if it's one grape, the way we do the winemaking processes are today showing different kind of aromatic expression to the Muscadet. So every Muscadet is different because the winemaker is not the same, the terroir is not the same, the aging in bottle is not the same, and the surely aging as well is not the same. So when you make all this difference, you can really have different Muscadet. So I think now we can maybe try to go on more serious things, Jo.
We're going to taste some wine. Excellent, excellent. We should send our apologies. Hopefully, those of you attending might have had chance to have some of the wines, one of the Charreau wines, in time for today's tasting. Regrettably, as with one or two other of the Wine Champs wines this year, the Society's Muscadet 2018 has now sold out. We do still have a few halves. And Emma has a half actually, so it'd be interesting.
I certainly do.
But Louise and I both do have a bottle of the Society's 2018. And one of the things that I always find fascinating, and it's one of the things I love about Muscadet, is that it has such a freshness. You know, this is a wine that is nearly 2 years old. It's a modestly priced wine. It's £7.95 a bottle. And it's still got lovely freshness. And I think a lot of what Louise was explaining about the sur-lit process is partly the reason for that. And Louise, there's a slight, I wouldn't describe it as a spritz, but there's the slightest prickle on the tongue, which is really refreshing in the wine. It really kind of lifts the palate of the wine. Does that come from the sur-lit? Is that a little bit of carbon dioxide at bottling?
So yeah, you're right. It's one of the things we really want to keep in the young Muscadet is some sparkle. So it's not very sparkling like a fizzy wine or sparkling wine, but you have some bubbles in the tongue, and that gives a lot of freshness. It's actually the fact that when we, as the wine keeps on the lees for 6 months, so for the Society's Muscadet, it's 6 months on the lees. In the lees, you have some CO2 that are transferred into the wine. And so when we do the bottling, we really do the bottling from the sur-lit. Because to do the bottling, you have 2 ways of doing it. You can entirely rack the wine. That means that you put the wine in another content. So you get rid of the lit. And then after you bottle the wine. What we do at Charreau is that we straight bottle from the tank where the wine is on the lit, just to avoid too many manipulations and to avoid the oxidation of the wine. So that preserves as well the CO2 because the wine remains on the lees and is not moved. So we still have the CO2. We can decide whether at the bottling we can just decide we don't want to have small bubbles or sparkles because it's not my style or I don't want to do it. But at Charreau we always keep it because it, as you mentioned, Jo, it's a clue for freshness and it's also a preservative for the wine. The CO2, thanks to the CO2, you can keep the wine longer and the aromatic expression of the wine is kept longer as well. So yeah, that's something important.
And that's something that I have really come to appreciate only over these last few years. I was introduced to Muscadet quite early on, but there's a great friend of mine who has a wine shop in the Loire. I spotted it on your map, actually. He has a wine shop in Saint-Nazaire.
Ah, okay.
Tasting with him some regular Charlie Muscadet, but really, 5 years old, even 10 years old, and the wine still had such good freshness. And I think it's in some ways it's a shame, because people always want the new vintage. They want that, especially by the sea. You expect it to be young and very fresh, but these wines do have that ability to keep in bottle, which those of us who sometimes find a bottle that we've forgotten about, realize, luckily Muscadet is one of those ones that usually comes out okay.
Yeah, regarding the aging capacity of the Muscadet, my grandfather started to forget wine in his cellar when he settled. He decided to bottle some wine and just leave it and forget for 2 or 3 years. At that time, the wine growers in the area were thinking that my grandfather was starting to be a little bit crazy. But that was the very beginning of thinking that Muscadet and the Melon de Bourgogne has a great capacity. There is something that you have to know about Melon de Bourgogne, that is a cousin of the Chardonnay. So it's the same family as Chardonnay and Aligoté. So that means that in some part we can really also find some resemblance between Chardonnay and the way Chardonnay can react in terms of ageability, and the Melon de Bourgogne as well. So and when some Melon de Bourgogne ages quite long, you can find some resemblance with the Chardonnay and some Burgundy wines. So as still finding the clue for Muscadet, because it's not the same grape, of course. But you can think, it's if you will have to put in a family, if you don't, if you're not very used to drink a very old Muscadet, you can maybe think, maybe it can be a kind of Chablis or a Burgundy wine. You can put it in this big family. So yes, Muscadet is a great wine to keep as well. Yeah,
I think it's a very good point, because I think there's a minerality in Muscadet and in white Burgundy, expressed differently maybe. It's that terroir character that comes through. But I think you do find that, and certainly when we come to talk about le Clos, the cru wine, when you get to that sort of level, those wines they're much more gastronomic. They're much more of they would be a very good alternative to Burgundy. We're not suggesting that they taste like Burgundy, but they're in terms of how you would serve them, they're a very good alternative to a white Burgundy, and actually jolly good value when you set them against white Burgundy too. Yeah. How are you on with your half bottle, Emma?
It's lovely, actually.
Going well,
and
good.
I'm picking up, there's a few people who said that they're really getting kind of very zesty fruit, kind of quite citrus fruit, but this lovely kind of mineral, kind of saltiness to the wine as well, which I think makes it extremely Moorish. It's the kind of wine which you just keep going back for another sip.
Just as it should be.
Potentially dangerous at lunchtime.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would say that
it's so nice and light.
This one is the great wine that you have to have daily in your fridge. That this is the one you can open just like, let's drink something. I have Muscadet in the fridge. It's perfect.
But actually, that's a very good point, because years ago, before your time, Louise, but some of us will remember a time when Muscadet wasn't quite so easy to drink as it is now. I think in a combination of better understanding of technology, also work in the vineyards. But I think perhaps climate change has had an influence as well. But all of those things combined, so we no longer find those, yes, there is freshness, but you don't have the searing acidity that sometimes we once found years ago in Muscadet. And it was interesting. I remember years ago now visiting my sister, and she said, we're drinking loads of Muscadet because it's just so light It's very versatile, actually. It goes with so many things, but it's light and easy. So for a glass of wine to have while you're cooking, it's just the perfect option. And so much more approachable these days. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm keeping a little bit of an eye on time. I know that we were
should.
saying that we'd run out of the 2018, but we do have the 2019. Did you say that was in or coming in?
It's now, it has now arrived. Yeah. So that
Excellent.
is, Louise, actually, how would you comment on, you know, on those? Was there a big difference between the vintages?
In between 19 and 18? Oh, yes, yeah. So in 18, when you think about 2018 in Muscadet, you have also to think about what happened in 16 and 17, because 16, 17 in Muscadet were very hard vintages because we had frost 2 years in a row. And when 2018 vintage arrived with beautiful berries, beautiful summer, beautiful vine, everything went perfect. If you ask my father, he will tell you that in the memory of wine grower, he didn't see that quality of wine with this kind of good volume as well. So there is a combination of all the elements gathered to make a great vintage in 2018. So 18 and 19 are not so different in terms of style. I mean, the wine are very ripened. Both of them are quite ripened. I would say that maybe 2019 today is getting a little bit older, of course, because there is a 1 year of difference, and you can feel also that the wine is getting a little bit more rich now, 2018, and 2019, and it's been bottled 3 months ago. You can still really feel this freshness through the bubbles as well. You will have more this fizzy aspect that you find in before Joe, when you were talking about the bubbles. You will find this more now in 2019 vintage because it's younger than 2018, because now the bubbles are included more and disappeared in the wine more. But 2019 compared to 18, regarding the way we did the harvest, it was, so we had also frost in 2019, so we had less grapes, so also better concentration. In 2000, you were talking about global warming and all these changes we are facing now in all the region in France, because it's not only the Loire Valley, it's in the south of France, everywhere. And in 2019, it was a very dry and very warm Indian summer, if you may remember. And we had great concentration and in terms of sugar in the fruits, and great maturity. So I can't remember the society's Muscadet is 12 degrees, but in some part of the vineyard, we have a degree of alcohol of 13 or 13.5. So that's something we also have to include in the structure of the wine now, that the wine are changing because the climate is changing as well. So yeah, 2019 for me will be a little bit more on the freshness aspect, even if it's more concentrated in terms of structure than 2018.
Great. Should we move on to the Clos?
So,
or if you want to talk about Loiselinière first?
I think we'll move straight on to the Clos, if that's okay. I'm just
and then
very aware
of
time. We've got a few questions that have come in as well. So yeah, without being bossy.
So I'm going to open my bottle. So Le Clos. So we've been working together with the Le Clos for a very long time, Joe, I think, because the first vintage we made of Le Clos was 2002. And at that time, so Château Loiselinière is an estate that is a 10-hectare vineyard. And we are making two wines in this vineyard. One is the regular Château Loiselinière that you have also. And the other one is the cru communal. So as we've been speaking about cru communal for almost 15 minutes before, now everybody knows what this cru communal is. So Le Clos de l'Oiselière that we are making for 2002 vintage is actually now becoming a cru communal and entering in the winemaking process and the specifications of the cru communal from the village of Haye Fouass. So that's why now you will find that there is a change on the label. Before it was named only Le Clos de l'Oiselière, which is the Napoleonian cadaster for this wine. And now we put the Le Clos du Château de l'Oiselière, but we add Haye Fouass name because it's a cru communal. It's a wine that we don't produce every year. It really depends on the quality of the vintage, because in Muscadet and in Charreau, we believe that not every vintage is great to make a wine that has great capacity of aging. For example, 2011 vintage was a good vintage to make a wine to drink 2 or 3 years after harvest, but it's not wine that we will keep for 10, 15 or 20 years. And this is the objective as long-term for the cru communal, is also to have a kind of Muscadet that you can drink after 10 or 15 years.
And it's a big investment as well, Louise. The whole, you've been doing this for a long time, but the whole cru communal process, because you're aging those wines, potentially several vintages, for a long time. So, we're currently selling the 2014.
Yes.
I think you said probably our next order we would move on to 2015, but we've just shipped a bit more of the 2014.
Yeah.
So, that's already 5 years. So, okay, the wine is longer in tank on its lees, but you can have, let's say 3 years in bottles. So you're storing that wine for much longer.
Yeah, it takes, we have to have special vats because most of the cru communaux are small volumes as well. Most of the times it's 60 or for the Le Clos a little bit more, because we have 4 hectares of the Le Clos de l'Oiselière. So we make 140 hectoliters per vintage. So for the Le Clos, we have a quite big tank, but for the other one, for example, the plot of vines are much more small. Donc, that means that we only have 60 to 70 hectoliters. So that means that we have to have small vats, and those vats are kept for 3-4 years. So that means that we don't move the wine during this time, but during harvest, those we can't use those vats. So that's also a logistic for us to have more and more small vats to have only for le cru, as we also have 4 cru. So for example, now we have 4 cru and we have 4 different vintages. So that means a lot of vats that are taken only for the cru communal. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know that you did some work on your cellar a few years ago and extended. Do you think you'll have to extend again, or have you got enough space for those 4 cru?
No, we are not going to extend now. We have enough, and manage also today to invest more in the vineyard. So we've managed to invest more on the vineyard the last 10-20 years. Now what we want to do is to be able to separate the vats. So maybe we will divide some vats or in the future, but for now we have enough. And what we want to do is to also it's not the objective is not to make the biggest amount possible. The objective is also every year to ask ourselves the question that we have this and this in stock right now. Do we need to make more also? It's a kind of commercialization aspect, because the idea is also to push forward. We want to sell the wine we produce. So we have every time we make a wine, we also want to say, okay, we can also sell it. So that's
and it's still a very new, it's still quite a new concept, quite a new idea. It's something that we need to talk about more to help people to understand and advertise the fact that this is, it's now a significant movement. There are quite a lot of producers now making wines of this quality.
Yeah.
So I think it's something we're going to see a lot more of.
Yeah.
I suppose as well for you, if you have those 4 different terroirs, you won't necessarily make the same wines every year. You know,
No.
the conditions may vary. So
Yeah.
that's going to be a really, really interesting learning process.
Yeah.
Have we got any questions we should be responding?
We've got some questions. Actually, one of them is kind of tying in with what you're talking about now, who Clive Woodhouse said that he visited you 30 years ago, and at that point you were experimenting with oak aging.
Yeah.
I'm presuming from what you're talking about that this is something that you are still doing. You're still experimenting with oak.
So it's not an experimentation anymore, because we are doing it for the first vintage was 1983. So it's my father that decided to make it, and I'm going to go back a little bit on what I said about the similarities in between Chardonnay and Melon de Bourgogne. So because when you use some Burgundy winemaking process, as for me, white wine in the oak barrel is a Burgundy thing. We can really tell that there is some similarities and in the evolution of the wine. So yes, this is something that we still do to age wine in oak barrel. So since the very beginning, we did some changes. At the very beginning, it was only a new barrel, so only new ones. And now what we do is that we renovate them by third. That means we have 1/3 of new ones. We have 1/3 that we use twice and 1/3 that we use 3 times. Because when it was very new, only new oak barrel, we had to have a lot of imagination in the terms of how the wine will evolve in the future, because the taste of the oak was very high. So now we blend different kind of oak aging to have something that is easier to apprehend and understand for us, to see how the wine will evolve in the future. And currently we sell 2015 vintage of the oak one, Château.
Yes, that we should point that out. That makes us a specific wine, doesn't it?
Yes. You have some people that the purist of Muscadet will tell you that they don't like it, because it's not something that is often is often done in Muscadet, and you have some people that really love it. So either you like it, either you don't like it. It really depends on the taste of people. People that like oaky wine, they will like the Muscadet, and also the fact that we decided also to use a less new oak barrel also gives more the space for the real taste of the Melon de Bourgogne, because the idea is not to do makeup wine.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So we now have a question from Paul Connellan. Hopefully we've got Paul.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Hi, Paul.
Louise, you sort of answered half my question coming up. It was really about the impact of global warming. And I was wondering how you were going to keep the alcohol content down, stop it going up too much. And also, does it mean that you're going to be doing earlier harvests than before?
So that's a very good question, and that's the question we are asking ourselves right now for 2020 vintage. So of course, global warming, as I said, has a huge impact, because we now have more alcohol content in the wine. For us in the Loire Valley, we still have a lucky situation. That means that having white wines that are 12.5 or 30 degrees is not that something completely crazy. This is just going to be a change in the style of the wine and in the style of the Muscadet that we will have to explain, and that we will have to also try to decrease a little bit. So the way for us to manage this kind of problem is, of course, to have earlier harvest. And in any case, harvest is made on the maturity of the grapes. So when we say that we have, so just to explain you how we decide to make harvests, we do analysis in the vineyard, and what we do is that once there is a density of sugar that gives 12 degrees, we do the harvest. So that permits us actually to try to maintain the degrees at 12 degrees of alcohol. So that's the way. And for example, 2020 vintage is planned to start on August 24.
I mean, I think one of the positives in climate change and these, yes, sometimes they're earlier harvests. It must be difficult for planning your holidays these days, Louise. But the wines are actually much more natural than they were, in the sense that, you know, for years, people haven't needed to chaptalize, which was a perfectly acceptable common practice, the addition of sugar to help raise the alcohol level a bit. But now you haven't had to do that. So you've got a naturally much more balanced wine and a purer, more natural product, which I think is great. You know,
I think
it can only be a good thing.
For us in the Loire Valley, the global warming for us is more a good thing than a bad thing. And especially for what you just said, we don't have to add sugar to have the right amount of alcohol. So that's good for us.
Yeah.
So we've got two more questions to squeeze in. Our next question is from Peter Chandler. Peter, I can see you there. Would you like to ask your question?
Well, it's more or less back to the first question, the family relationship with Chardonnay. I felt that the Sourly process softens the wine, but not quite in the same way as oak softens the Burgundy wines. So you get the fruit still, but you get the softness. So you don't lose the upfront fruit, but you still have the softness. So I prefer the Sourly, and the process you said was an antioxidant.
So yes, you're right. The Sourly process really gives more structure to the wine. It also gives more roundness. So sometimes that's why also, for example, for another appellation that you may know that is called Gros Plan. Gros Plan is a Folle Blanche grape. It's very known for having a high acidic taste. And most of the people now, they do Sourly as well on the Gros Plan, just to give more roundness for the Gros Plan and have less acidity. So yes, definitely the Sourly gives more roundness, and to me this is why also 99% of our wines are made Sourly. This is for us more qualitative, because also it's an antioxidant. And I may not have heard well what you say, but that remember something also, that because of this antioxidant thing, we add less sulfites into the wine. So that's something very also interesting. Most of the people think and have this idea that Muscadet and white wine in general are high in sulfites. And for us, in the Sourly is also a technique to decrease the sulfites amount we had in the wine. Yeah, I hope I replied to your question, because I didn't hear well what everything was said, but hopefully I replied.
You replied perfectly. So we've got another question now from, I think it's from Paula Carter. Is Paula, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We certainly can.
Lovely. Louise, thank you so much. Absolutely brilliant presentation, and your English, I have to say, is flawless. I've been quite struck for the number of the wine champs that we've tasted over the last few days, how many of the wine growers and producers have looked to make wine with less interventions, more natural production, more organic production. And it seems to me it's not a coincidence that we're finding a correlation between wines that perform really well in the wine champs and winemakers who are moving away from intervention. So I just wondered what your what you're doing in your winery in terms of, are you using any organic techniques? Is that something you're trying to do? You've sort of hinted that Surly is a way of reducing some of the interventions, but I'd be really interested to hear if you're going to try and reduce the amount of interventions in future.
So that's a very good question. I think I partially replied earlier, saying that the Surly is antioxidant, so we can really reduce, for example, the sulfites. So sulfite is for me an intervention we do in the wine. We also reduce intervention because, as Jo mentioned earlier, we don't need to add sugar anymore to have the good level of alcohol. In terms of what we do in the vineyard, this is something that today is a huge question. And when I joined the winery in 2014, I really wanted to try to push a little bit forward the fact that we really want to preserve the environment and all this kind of thing with less intervention as well in the vineyard. So we are not with the label of organic. But what we do is since 2019 vintage, and I can say it now because it's been a hard work, we are what we call HVE, which means haute valeur environnementale. So maybe, Jo, how could you translate it in English?
Oh, I can't remember.
Kind of biodiversity label. So the idea is to try to reduce the amounts of herbicides and pesticides we add in the vineyard by using techniques that will go back a little bit more to nature and try that the nature can balance more by itself. So that's what we call helping biodiversity. So for example, to give you a good example of it, for example, we don't use herbicides because we work mechanically in the vineyard. So all the grass is removed mechanically. And the other thing we do is that we use sexual confusion. Is the translation good in English, Joe?
Yeah.
Sexual confusion is the idea of avoiding having I lose my English now.
Pesticides.
Papillon?
Oh,
Butterflies or moths?
Right. So the idea is that the butterflies can't have babies butterflies, and so the babies butterfly, they don't eat the baby grapes. So that's just a kind of avoiding that the flies have an impact on the vineyard. So there is no butterflies, there is no reproduction of father and mother butterfly. That's the way of explaining it for me. So yeah,
it's this haute valeur environnementale. I can't remember the translation, but it's something that we're seeing more and more. So basically, it's an accredited form of sustainable viticulture.
Yeah,
and we've looked at it and we think it's very robust. It looks very good, and for some regions, such as Muscadet or such as the Nantais, where you have so much sea influence, organic viticulture is very, very challenging. It's the same in Bordeaux. You've got that Atlantic influence. So to go all the way to organic is really hard. But to go to these lengths, I think is really good. So it's great to hear that you've gone down that route. Yeah.
It's something that we are actually doing for a very long time. But this is a lot of paperwork mostly. We really wanted to put a name. I think that now, as you, Paula, most of the people and the consumer, they want to know what they drink. They want to know who is doing it and why they chose this kind of way to do the wine. And I think we also need us to explain and give you more clue and to be able to choose why you want to drink this wine. It's good, but also because the wine growers want to preserve also the environment. It's something very important today, I think, and we have to explain us as a wine grower that the vineyard is our primary thing, is our raw material. So we have to preserve our raw material as long as possible and for the eternity. So that's why we also have a commitment to Mother Nature to preserve what she gave us. So that's something we need to explain to you as a consumer, I think.
Mhm.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Again, the timekeeper. We've got one final question that a few people actually have asked over the internet. Can we come and visit once lockdown has been lifted? Do you have, are there ways to visit the winery? Are they on your details on your website?
Well, I think I said this is how I started the presentation. Said there is only 1 hour flight from from London Gatwick, and 25 minutes drive then. So you're more than welcome to come when you want in the winery. We've already welcomed quite some members of the wine society over the years, and we are always happy to see you and meet you in the vineyard. And just keep in touch with the society team to let us know that you're coming, and we will make everything possible to meet you in person. Because when people come at the winery, it's either my father, I, or both of us that welcome people. So you're more than welcome to come.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
And Louise, can I ask you one last question, which I don't think I've ever asked you? Did you always know that you were going to come back and join the family firm? Was it something that you that was a love that you thought you would return to, or was it a later decision?
It was a later decision. I can tell you the story if you want. So of course I've been raised in always with a wine glass on the table. Even if I was too young to drink, I was seeing my parents drinking wines, and so I've been raised in the respect of wine, and drinking wine is as a pleasure. So I always like gastronomy, food, wine, and all. Also, wine is a social thing, so it gathers people. That's why I love it. And so I started actually. I have a degree in law translation, so juridical translation. So that's also explain a little bit. My English is not too bad, even if I try to maintain it as much as I can. But at some point when I was in my second university year, my father asked me if I wanted to come with him in Vinexpo, Hong Kong. And I said, yes, I want to go to Hong Kong with you. You will go to your fair in the city. And so I went with him.
You were going to go shopping, weren't you?
Yeah, visiting and him going to the fair. Because Vinexpo Hong Kong is for the people that don't know, is a very huge fair. Is one of the biggest Asian fair for wine. And so when I arrived there, I actually ended up going every day from the beginning to the end to the fair with my father. And I love the spirit of people chatting together about wine, all gathered in one place to talk about one kind of product. And I love the moving thing about wine and all of this. So when I get back home, I said, okay, there is nothing else I want to do. I want to work in the wine business. So so that's why I decided to change a little bit, but I didn't have the I could not do analogy because I was not on the science part on my degrees. Mm-hmm. So I decided to go to Bordeaux to learn more the marketing and the commercialization, the wine business in particular. And at the end of it, I spent 8 months in the US working for a wine importer. And then I go back to the winery, and my father asked me if I wanted to join the winery, and I said yes. So that's the story.
Excellent. Well, I think your father was, there's a word in English which is canny. I think your father was very canny, very clever to invite you to Hong Kong. I suspect he had an idea in his mind.
Yeah, I think so.
Anyway, it is to our advantage. It's great to see that you are there and that you are taking on the family business. And we look forward to seeing you at when we start off with events again, Emma, real live events.
Absolutely.
Forward to seeing you and Bernard again in the future. And thank you so much for your time today. I know you're with friends in Brittany at the moment rather than at home in the Loire, but so you're probably going to go and eat some lovely seafood, are you now?
Yeah.
Make us very jealous.
Sounds perfect.
I'll stick to my tuna sandwich, but it'll with my glass of Muscadet.
Well,
thank you, Louise. That was wonderful.
Thank you very much,
Thank you very much for the invitation. It was a pleasure to share this with you two, and all the other people that have been with us today. So thank you all for your support for all these years. Thank you.
Great, fantastic. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
And thank you to all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.